All right, strap yourselves in, because today we are going deep into the world of Arthur Rimbaud,
A 19th century poet, yeah.
whose life, you could say, was as explosive as his verse.
It's really fascinating how much his personality seems to come through in his writing.
And that's where we're bringing in this idea of the Enneagram
Right, we're going to try understand Rimbaud through that lens.
for this deep dive.
Yeah.
So for folks who might be new to this, the Enneagram, it's a system of personality types.
9 types, each with its own motivations, fears, the whole deal.
And we're honing in on one specific type for Rimbaud.
The sexual 4.
Yeah. Okay, so paint a picture for us.
Well, imagine someone incredibly emotional,
Right.
driven by this need to be seen as unique, special, set apart.
Okay, I can see that like an artist,
Exactly.
especially back then.
But at the same time, there's this nagging feeling like something's missing.
So it's not just I'm different, it's I'm better, almost.
There's an element of that, yeah, and it leads to what's called devaluation.
Evaluation.
The sexual 4 puts others down to build themselves up, you know?
That's rough.
And we see this with Rimbaud and his relationship with Paul Verlaine.
Another poet.
Very famous. And Rimbaud, despite being in love with him, was constantly belittling him.
No way, really. What? Like he'd critique his writing.
Oh, yeah. In their letters, you find Rimbaud saying things like, your poetry lacks bite, or you're too conventional. Imagine getting those love notes.
Ouch.
Classic devaluation.
So is this then how his poetry comes out?
Yeah.
Like attacking everything?
That's where it gets so interesting.
Okay.
Rimbaud's poetry is full of these attacks on societal norms, bourgeois values.
He even called Paris the capital of imbeciles.
Right.
In one poem.
So was this just him being a rebel artist? Or was it deeper, this need to tear everything down to feel superior, like the sexual 4 does?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier this thing about guilt, too.
Right. Along with projection, it's a big part of this type.
They blame the world for their problems.
They feel like the victim, but then they swing back to intense guilt for their own actions. Very push and pull.
And we see this with Rimbaud, too.
Oh yeah, A Season in Hell, one of his works.
Famous one.
He rails against fate, higher powers, blames them for his suffering, but then what does he do? Quits poetry entirely at age 20.
Self-sabotage.
Could be seen that way, running from responsibility, maybe even self-punishment, who knows?
It's giving very dramatic, this whole emotional roller coaster.
Very sexual 4, but Rimbaud was also known for, like, always needing new experiences, right?
Yeah, like a wild child kind of energy.
And that's not just youthful stuff, it's core to the type.
Okay.
Craving intensity, newness, always searching for something more.
Makes it hard to settle down, I bet.
Absolutely. And Rimbaud's life, perfect example.
Yeah, he drops poetry, travels to Africa, even gets mixed up in arms dealing,
Like he was running from something, right?
trying to outrun himself.
Maybe. The Enneagram talks about this inner void, like you're trying to fill it with external stuff when it's internal work that's needed. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got this devaluation, the guilt swings, the need for intensity. It's painting a pretty intense picture, I'd say.
Definitely not boring.
But we can't talk about Rimbaud without the Verlaine relationship.
Right. Super dramatic. Everyone knows that.
Like soap opera level.
Passion, fights, even physical altercations, but undeniable love and this artistic connection too. Don't forget that.
Yeah, it really does sound like the highest highs and the lowest lows all in one.
A sexual 4 emotional landscape in a nutshell.
And that must have affected the poetry too, right? Not just their personal lives.
Oh, absolutely. You see it on the page.
How so?
Rimbaud's poetry, you'll have these moments of incredible beauty and then bam, plunged into darkness, despair.
So a wild ride for the reader too, not just him living it.
Exactly. Full spectrum of human emotion, sometimes within a few lines.
Wow.
Now, another piece of this sexual 4 puzzle, the tendency to transgress, to break the rules.
Okay.
But for them, it's not just rebellion. It's about proving they're special, unique.
Like, they have to shock people to feel validated.
You could say that.
And Rimbaud, well, his whole life was kind of like that, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. His poetry shattered conventions, helped pave the way for symbolism, surrealism, huge movements.
So he was ahead of his time, but
Mhm.
also, like, deliberately pushing buttons.
Rejected social norms, lived a bohemian life, scandalized everyone.
This phrase comes to mind, épater la bourgeoisie.
To shock the middle class, yeah, that was Rimbaud.
So was it always calculated? Or was he just being authentically himself? A true sexual 4, consequences be damned.
Good question. Was it an act or just him being Rimbaud? Something to keep in mind as we go deeper.
Well, he definitely made an impact. You can't deny that.
For sure.
This Enneagram lens, I gotta say, it's giving us some pretty insightful looks into what made him tick.
I think so too.
But I'm curious how this all plays out when we look at the poetry itself in more detail.
That's where the real fun begins, because we can see it all right there on the page.
All right, so let's take a closer look at some of Rimbaud's most famous poems.
And analyze them through this lens of the sexual four.
This is where it gets really exciting.
It does.
We'll be right back after a short break
Can't wait.
to dive even deeper.
Deeper we go.
Okay, so we've kind of laid the groundwork here
The foundation.
for understanding Rimbaud as this sexual four type.
Yeah.
Now let's actually get to the good stuff.
The poetry itself?
The pumps.
Right?
Where do we even begin? The guy wrote so much and in such a, unique style.
Well, let's take one of his most famous, The Drinking Boat.
Okay.
It's a whirlwind of imagery, symbolism, but looking through this sexual four lens, some really cool stuff pops out.
All right, so for our listeners, picture this.
A boat adrift at sea, totally at the mercy of the currents.
But it's not just any boat, right?
It's Rimbaud himself.
Metaphorically speaking.
Exactly, and that journey the boat goes on, it becomes like the inner turmoil of the sexual four.
Always searching, never quite seeing what they're after.
Spot on.
There's this one line, I always loved it. I have seen the sun, stained with mystic horrors, lighting up long violet coagulations.
Wow.
So vivid, but also kind of creepy,
That's Rimbaud's genius.
Messing with us?
Beauty, ugliness, light, darkness, all smashed together.
And that's, if we think about it, kind of like the sexual four wanting to be different, right?
To shock, yeah, subvert expectations, exactly.
Like, I'm not going to give you what you want, I'm going to do my thing.
And there's more in the poem about this need for something more, like the boat longing for the unknown.
Uncharted waters.
Rejecting the ordinary, just like Rimbaud did with his life.
Dropped poetry, ran off to who knows where.
It's a declaration of independence, this poem.
Almost like a manifesto.
Yeah, against society, expectations, the whole bit.
But does he ever actually find what he's looking for?
That's the million-dollar question.
This constant chase for the new, was it fulfilling or just making that inner void worse?
Scholars still debate that.
Did he find peace? Or was he chasing a phantom?
It's kind of a tragic thought.
It is, but there's also something beautiful about, the struggle itself.
You know, the search for authenticity?
Yeah.
Speaking of struggle, we got to talk about A Season in Hell.
Oh, that one's intense.
Raw, visceral,
Full of pain.
the dark side of the sexual four, for sure.
The guilt you were talking about.
Yeah, the self-loathing, feeling trapped.
I remember this line.
Hmm.
I have created all the festivals of my soul.
Powerful stuff.
Like he's saying, it's my fault, but I can change it too.
That's the key.
Sexual fours, they feel like victims, but they also know deep down they have agency.
They create their own reality, in a way.
So A Season in Hell was that Rimbaud confronting his demons,
Yeah.
trying to break free.
Maybe you can feel the struggle in every line, like he's wrestling with himself.
And then he just stops writing poetry altogether.
So strange.
After this deeply personal, soul-bearing work,
It's like he exhausted himself making it.
poured everything out, then nothing left.
Yeah.
What a journey, though, when you think about it, from those early poems, rebellious, idealistic,
To the depths of A Season in Hell.
and then silence,
His life really does embody the highs and lows of the sexual four.
beauty and pain.
All of it.
Makes you wonder, if he hadn't quit, what else would he have given us?
What other depths he could have explored.
It's tantalizing, right?
Part of his mystique, I guess.
Leaves us wanting more, searching for answers he never quite gave us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've looked at the poetry, the relationships, the life choices, all through this sexual four lens.
Makes sense.
It's been enlightening. But I gotta ask, what does this all mean for us, the readers?
Good question.
Why should we care about this poet from so long ago?
Because even though it's from another time, Rimbaud's work, it speaks to something universal.
About being human.
Exactly. These themes, alienation, searching for meaning, wanting to break free. We all deal with that.
Regardless of personality type.
It's part of the human condition.
So Rimbaud's poetry, it's like a reflection of our own struggles.
In a way, yeah. A reminder that we're not alone in feeling lost, wanting more. And maybe by understanding him, we understand ourselves a little better.
That's kind of beautiful.
The power of art.
So for our listeners now fascinated by Rimbaud, where should they start?
Well, definitely the poems we've talked about, The
Hmm.
Drunken Boat, A Season in Hell, those are key.
They're considered his masterpieces, right?
Absolutely. They give you his voice, his style, the evolution of it all.
And of course, for anyone wanting to learn more about the Enneagram itself,
Tons of resources out there.
it's a fascinating system.
For understanding yourself, others, really helpful.
Maybe you'll even be inspired to tap into your own creativity.
Who knows?
Rimbaud would probably like that.
I think so.
You know, it's wild to think Rimbaud was writing like over 100 years ago,
I know, right?
but it still feels so relevant.
Absolutely. The rebellion, the feeling of being alienated, searching for meaning.
Like, those are timeless human things,
Exactly. He really tapped into something fundamental, I think.
which is why people are still fascinated by him today, right?
Oh, totally. His work challenges us, provokes us, inspires us, even now.
It's like he's saying it's okay to question, to push boundaries,
To want more out of life.
and to find beauty, meaning even when things are tough,
Exactly.
we could all use a bit more of that, I think.
Especially these days.
So for anyone listening who's like, I got to learn more about Rimbaud now, where should they start?
I'd say dive into his poetry collections.
Okay.
A Season in Hell, Illuminations, those are the big ones.
His masterpieces, right?
Absolutely. They show you his perspective, how his style evolved.
And for those who want to go deeper into the Enneagram itself,
There's so much out there, books, websites.
it's a fascinating system, you know?
Yeah, for self-discovery, understanding others.
Maybe it'll even inspire you to get creative.
Rimbaud would like that.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Arthur Rimbaud.
It's been a journey.
It has. Always fun to revisit his work.
Me too.
And to all our listeners, thanks for being here. We hope you got something out of it.
Some new insights into this poetic genius.
And maybe even learned a bit about yourselves along the way.
I hope so.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning,
Keep embracing the complexity of life.
because let's face it, that's where the interesting stuff happens, right?
Like Rimbaud's poetry, full of contradictions, but brilliant nonetheless.
Exactly. Au revoir.
Au revoir.